All right. So are you ready to dive into some serious trade policy? Because we are talking tariffs.
Oh, yeah.
And not just on anyone.
Right.
Canada, Mexico, and China.
Huge.
This is a big one, folks. President Trump is putting these tariffs on starting this Saturday.
Wow.
February 1st, 2025. So this is hot off the presses. We've got a stack of articles here.
Yeah.
Breaking news analysis, the whole 9 yards. By the end of this deep dive, you'll understand why this is happening, what the potential fallout could be,
Right.
and what to watch for in the coming weeks.
Yeah, this is a pretty big deal. I mean, we're talking about potentially impacting like $1.6 trillion
Wow.
in annual trade between the U.S. and these three countries.
Yeah, so let's break it down. We're looking at a 25% tariff on goods from Mexico, another 25% on Canada, and then 10% on goods from China.
Yeah.
This isn't just the White House has confirmed it.
The White House is pointing to fentanyl as the reason.
Okay.
That incredibly potent and deadly synthetic opioid
Right.
that's been flowing into the U.S.
It's a serious crisis, no doubt. Trump advisor Peter Navarro
Oh, yeah.
even compared the number of annual fentanyl deaths in America to the entire capacity of the Superdome.
Wow.
Chilling image.
Gee, especially with the Super Bowl happening this weekend.
Right.
Talk about tying it into current events.
Yeah, it definitely paints a stark picture. But using tariffs
Right.
to
Yeah.
combat a public health crisis.
It's a controversial approach, for sure, to say the least.
It seems a little indirect, right?
Yeah.
Like trying to fix a leaky faucet with a hammer. What kind of impact are we seeing in the markets?
Well, the Dow Jones took a 200-point hit right after the announcement.
Okay.
And businesses hate uncertainty.
Oh, for sure.
And right now, there's a lot of it because we don't know the specifics of how these tariffs will be applied, just that they're coming on Saturday.
Right.
But here's where it gets interesting. The S&P 500 and Nasdaq actually stayed positive.
So some investors aren't panicking.
Exactly. Some see this as a short-term blip, while others believe certain sectors will actually benefit. Think about industries like steel or manufacturing less foreign competition. Could be a short-term win for them.
Right.
It's a gamble, though.
And then there's the inflation question. Economists are worried these tariffs could reignite inflation just as things were starting to cool down. Bad timing.
Well, the timing is definitely awkward. The Commerce Department just reported that inflation rose to 2.6% in December. Now, some analysts see positive signs in the details of that report, but it's definitely something the Federal Reserve is keeping a close eye on,
Yeah.
especially with the possibility of retaliation.
Right. What happens if Canada, Mexico, and China hit back with their own tariffs?
That's the nightmare scenario.
Yeah.
A trade war. And history shows us those rarely end well for anyone involved. They lead to higher prices for consumers, job losses, and overall economic instability.
Right.
It's a real concern.
Yeah, it's a big deal for sure.
It is.
So much to unpack here.
Oh, yeah. And it's not just those three countries. The White House has said Trump hasn't decided about tariffs on the European Union yet.
So we've got market jitters, inflation fears, a potential trade war brewing, and now the EU might get thrown into the mix.
Yeah.
This is getting complicated.
It's definitely a complex situation, and it has people debating, whether these kinds of protectionist trade policies actually help or hurt the American economy.
Right. So let's unpack that. Some argue tariffs protect American jobs and industries by making it more expensive to buy goods from other countries.
Right. The idea is it levels the playing field and it encourages people to buy American-made products.
Okay.
They also argue it helps reduce the trade deficit, which is basically the difference between how much a country imports versus exports.
But doesn't that also mean American consumers end up paying more for those products?
Exactly.
Right.
That's the main argument against tariffs. Critics say they hurt consumers by raising prices on imported goods. And what if other countries retaliate with their own tariffs?
Right.
That could really hurt American businesses who rely on exports.
Yeah, it's like a delicate dance.
It is.
Trying to protect your interests without stepping on anyone's toes. Especially when you consider we're talking about some of America's closest trading partners.
Yeah.
Canada and Mexico.
Those aren't just economic relationships. They're deeply intertwined with cultural ties and shared history.
Right.
And yet here we are talking about potential trade wars.
It makes you wonder what the long-term strategy is here. Is it truly about the fentanyl crisis? Are tariffs just a bargaining chip to get concessions on other issues,
Yeah.
like immigration or trade deals?
It's hard to say for sure, but the lack of clarity from the White House is definitely fueling speculation. And that uncertainty is making everyone nervous, not just in the U.S., but around the world.
So what kind of impact are we looking at for each country?
Okay.
Let's start with Canada.
Well, Canada is our second largest trading partner. We have a long history of working together on economic issues. These tariffs, though, are putting a strain on that relationship.
I imagine Canadian businesses aren't too happy about this.
They're not.
Hmm.
Canadian officials have called these tariffs unjustified and unacceptable. They've even warned they'll retaliate with their own tariffs if they have to.
Which would hurt both economies. I mean, they supply us with a lot of raw materials and manufactured goods, and a lot of American businesses rely on selling their products to Canadians.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's a tough spot for the U.S. to be in. They want to protect American businesses and workers, but they don't want to damage a crucial alliance.
Right.
And it's a similar situation with Mexico.
Right. Mexico is our third largest trading partner. They're a major supplier of agricultural products, manufactured goods, and energy to the U.S.
And American companies have invested a lot of money in Mexico, so there's a lot at stake on both sides. The Mexican government has called these tariffs protectionist and harmful, and have said they'll fight back through the World Trade Organization.
A trade war with Mexico wouldn't be good for anyone. And then there's China, the elephant in the room.
China's our largest trading partner, but also our biggest economic competitor.
Right.
And this isn't the first time tariffs have been used in this relationship. The Trump administration has accused China of unfair trade practices, like stealing intellectual property and manipulating their currency.
So these new tariffs are just adding fuel to the fire.
Exactly. They've already been in a tit-for-tat trade war for years.
Wow.
Each country keeps raising tariffs on the other in retaliation.
It's a dangerous game. What's the end goal here?
That's the million-dollar question. Some analysts think the U.S. is trying to completely separate our economies to stop relying on China so much. Others think it's a negotiating tactic to get a better trade deal.
Okay.
It's hard to know for sure.
Either way, there's a lot at stake. The U.S.-China economic relationship is one of the most important in the world.
What happens between these two countries will have ripple effects everywhere. And it's not just about economics anymore. This trade war is impacting national security and diplomatic relations, too.
It's a complicated issue, and these tariffs are just the tip of the iceberg. We're talking about one of the biggest geopolitical challenges of our time.
Yeah, it really highlights how interconnected everything is, doesn't it?
It does.
The global economy.
Yeah.
Like a giant chain reaction.
It really is.
Yeah.
One country makes a move, and it can trigger a cascade of consequences around the world. These tariffs could end up impacting businesses and consumers far beyond the U.S., Canada, Mexico, and China.
We're already seeing global stock markets reacting, and there's so much uncertainty about what happens next.
Right.
It's not just the economic side either, right?
Right. There are geopolitical implications as well. These tariffs are putting pressure on relationships between some of the most powerful countries in the world. It's a tricky situation. Everyone wants to protect their own interests, but they also have to cooperate to deal with global challenges.
So what can we do about it? Besides just feeling overwhelmed by all this?
Well, staying informed is key. Pay attention to the news, but don't just stick to one source. Try to understand the different perspectives on the issue. And don't be afraid to ask questions.
Question everything, right?
Exactly. Challenge assumptions, think critically, and talk to people with different viewpoints. It's also important to remember that we all have a role to play in shaping the future of the global economy. What do you mean?
Well, we can support businesses that are committed to fair trade practices. We can push for policies that promote sustainable development. And we can make informed choices as consumers. Every action, no matter how small, can have an impact.
So it's not just about governments and big corporations. We can all do our part.
Exactly. Ultimately, it's about creating a more just equitable and sustainable world for everyone.
Well said. So there you have it. We've taken a deep dive into the complex world of tariffs and trade wars.
We've covered a lot, but this story is far from over. The coming days and weeks will be critical, and we'll be here to help you make sense of it all.
Keep those questions coming, stay curious, and most importantly, stay engaged. The future of the global economy depends on all of us.
Until next time, keep learning, keep thinking, and keep diving deep.
And remember, knowledge is power. Use it wisely.